Let's be honest. Being a woman with ADHD in the workplace is exhausting. You're not just doing your job, you're doing it while battling distractions, self doubt, and the invisible labor of trying to seem fine. This is ADHD where we talk about everyday life and ADHD. I'm your host, Dr. J. I'm a licensed psychologist who works with people with ADHD. Today, we're talking about ADHD and workplace stress. Workplace stress isn't one size fits all, and for women with ADHD, it often comes with the invisible weight that others don't see. I want to be very clear. ADHD is not about laziness, lack of intelligence, or a character flaw. It's a neurodevelopmental condition that affects how the brain regulates attention, emotions, and behavior. And that can absolutely impact work performance in nuanced ways. Let's talk about some of those. Number one is time perception issues. Now, when it comes to time perception issues, this relates to a distorted perspective on time. The ADHD brain really has a hard time sensing how much time has passed, how much is left, and how long something will take. It's really like living without an internal clock. Here's how it might show up at work: being chronically late, misjudging how long a task will take, either rushing through it or dragging it out, difficulty prioritizing what needs to be done now versus later, and also struggling with transitions between tasks, especially if you're hyper-focused or dreading the next thing. Number two is impulsivity. Impulsivity in ADHD isn't just about making rash decisions. It's about acting without pausing to consider the consequences. Here's how it might show up at work: interrupting colleagues during meetings, sending off emails or Slack messages without proofreading, blurting out ideas without filtering, jumping into projects without checking in with the team, or fully reading the instructions. Number three is distractibility. Distractibility is difficulty in filtering out irrelevant stimuli, whether that's a coworker talking, an email notification, or a random thought about lunch. ADHD involves deficits in sustained attention and selective attention, which means the brain has trouble maintaining focus on what's important and ignoring what's not. Here's how it might show up for you at work: constantly switching tasks or tabs. So, hello, if you have 937 Chrome tabs open, you're not alone. And even though I don't have ADHD, I'm a part of the club. It may also show up as forgetting what you were doing mid-task or mid-sentence, struggling with open floor plan office environments or with constant interruptions, and trouble finishing tasks that you started. Number four is emotional sensitivity. Many people don't realize ADHD comes with intense emotional reactivity. ADHD brains often have an exaggerated fight-flight response and difficulty regulating emotions once triggered. Studies have linked ADHD with heightened emotional ability or rapid mood shifts. Here's how this might show up at work: overreacting to perceived rejection or criticism, ruminating over minor work mishaps for hours or days, difficulty calming down after feeling frustrated, embarrassed, or hurt, or feeling overwhelmed by workplace politics, microaggressions, or tone-deaf comments. Number five is executive dysfunction. Executive dysfunction is the core of ADHD. It refers to the challenges in managing the mental skills needed to plan, organize, prioritize, and start and complete tasks. The executive functioning network is less active in the ADHD brain. Now let's talk about how this may show up at work. You may struggle to start tasks even if you know that they're super important. This relates to task initiation and ADHD. Getting overwhelmed when tasks have too many steps, forgetting deadlines, losing documents, or missing steps, and finally having difficulty breaking big goals into smaller actions. Keep in mind that as a woman, you were likely diagnosed later in life, so you probably developed the mindset that you're simply fudging everything up and it's all your fault. Couple this with the societal pressures that are placed on women, and basically you're showing up at the potluck with raisins in your potato salad, and nobody wants to eat that. Studies show that women with ADHD are more likely to internalize their symptoms as personal failings rather than neurological differences. That internalization leads to anxiety, perfectionism, and depression, conditions that can mask ADHD and lead to delays in diagnosis. Here are a few workplace stressor themes that I hear about from women all the time. Let me know in the comments if any of these sound familiar to you. Number one is multitasking expectations and constant task switching. The expectation here is to be able to juggle 5 things at once, to shift gears very quickly, and to never drop the ball. Now let's talk about the ADHD impact on this expectation. The ADHD brain does not multitask well. It excels at hyperfocus on one thing or feels overwhelmed by all of the things. Constant switching can also increase cognitive load, which taxes executive functioning and increases the likelihood of making mistakes and fatigue. Also, switching tasks too often can worsen working memory and lead to that feeling of like, why did I come into this room? Except you're just sitting at your desk. And there's an emotional toll to this expectation. You might feel incompetent, disorganized, or ashamed, even though it's the system that's unreasonable. Number 2 is time-based pressure. The expectation here is to show up on time, meet all the deadlines, and log hours with minimal supervision. Now let's talk about the ADHD impact. Time perception issues make it hard to estimate how long tasks will take, leading to chronic lateness or procrastination. Executive dysfunction affects planning and follow-through, especially with open-ended or multi-step projects. And then lastly, productivity tracking tools, so like time tracking apps or keystroke monitors, can feel invasive or demoralizing, especially when they don't reflect real effort. The emotional toll here can be things like shame spirals, imposter syndrome, anxiety, or burnout from constantly trying to catch up. Number 3 is overcompensation and perfectionism. The expectation here is being detail-oriented, always prepared, and again, to never drop the ball. Now let's get into the ADHD impact. Women with ADHD often develop hypervigilant coping strategies, so over-preparing, triple-checking, and people-pleasing, all to avoid criticism or exposure. This perfectionism is exhausting and unsustainable. Trying to outperform your symptoms can mask the ADHD, leading to delayed diagnosis or support. And there is an emotional toll: burnout, low self-worth, fear of failure, and inability to rest. Number 4 is unacknowledged or unaccommodated neurodivergence. The expectation here is that everyone should work the same way and just follow the schedule. Now let's get into the ADHD impact. Traditional 9-to-5 environments aren't often ADHD friendly. They have rigid schedules, open office floor plans, excessive meetings, and a lack of sensory breaks can all increase workplace overwhelm. Most workplaces don't offer or even know about accommodations like flexible schedules, alternative workflows, quiet workspaces, or verbal versus written communication preferences. And the emotional toll here is that you can feel gaslit, excluded, or like you're asking for too much by simply needing support. Let's transition into talking about what we can do in these scenarios. The first thing that I want to talk about is advocacy, which relates to what I was just saying. It's important to advocate for yourself and request reasonable accommodations. Now, to be clear, the job is the job. What I mean by this is if you worked in a bank, which traditionally operates on a 9-to-5 schedule, it's highly unlikely that they're going to change that for you. It's more likely that you're going to have to work on your sleep schedule and use other strategies to adapt to their schedule, or choose employment options that have different working hours. While employers should make reasonable accommodations, they have to actually be reasonable. So for example, if you had a physical disability and were wheelchair bound, it's unlikely that you're going to work as a roofer because that requires capabilities that are outside of that individual's capacity, and there really isn't a reasonable accommodation that can be made in that avenue. However, asking to run a meeting notes app during one-on-ones with your supervisor because you need written instructions is a totally reasonable accommodation. Or if you don't do any client-facing work and you're not in an industry that has to align to a 9 to 5 business model, you could also ask for a modified schedule like 10 to 6 or 11 to 7. Other accommodations that my patients have looked into in the past include things like routine check-ins with their supervisor because they needed those touch points in order to stay on task, body doubling, requesting to use noise-canceling headphones or access to a more quiet workspace, and the ability to be able to use certain time management apps or tools. If you have other accommodations that you've requested, received, and have helped, please put them in the comment section below. We need to help each other advocate. Number 2 is to create communication boundaries that work for you. You don't have to answer every email within 5 seconds or explain your entire brain to coworkers, but you can communicate what helps. Here's a few strategies. Use email templates or Slack auto responses. So things like, thanks for your message, I'll respond within 24 hours. You can also schedule email check-in blocks into your calendar so that you're not constantly switching. You can also ask for clarification in writing if verbal instructions overwhelm you. And if you notice that you're falling behind on a deadline, you can signal to a trusted coworker or supervisor that you need assistance. Number 3 is to implement the body doubling technique. ADHD brains crave co-regulation. A body double is someone who sits quietly beside you, whether this is virtually or in person, to help you stay on task. I have people who are close to me with ADHD, and if they see me working, they automatically get into a productive mode. It bypasses the internal motivation struggle and taps into the social part of the ADHD brain. Here's a couple strategies for how to do this. The first is that you can ask a coworker to touch base during a work period. What this might look like is saying to them, let's do some deep work for 45 minutes and then check in. Or you can use apps like FocusMate or Flown to find virtual accountability partners. Number 4 is to use visual time management systems. Women with ADHD often struggle with time perception issues, so traditional planners don't always help. You need something that is visual and tactile. Here's a few strategies on how to make this happen. The first is to time block your day with color-coded Google Calendar blocks, or you can use analog visual timers like the Time Timer. Another thing that I often recommend is to use what I would call backward planning. And so this is where you start with the deadline or the outcome that you're looking for, and then work backward to schedule the steps that it will take to reach that goal on time. And I often recommend that people set 2 reminders, one for starting a task and one for finishing it, because hyperfocus is real. Number 5 is to externalize everything. Do not rely on your memory. Working memory is not your bestie with ADHD. Don't try to keep everything in your head. This is how stress gets a brewing. I tell my patients all the time that if it's not written down, it doesn't exist and it won't happen. Here are a few strategies that can be helpful. The first is to use checklists for recurring tasks. It's important to either make them digital if that's what you prefer, or if you're going to put them on paper, make them pretty. I have these colored Post-its and index cards that make a world of difference in my day. The second thing you might consider is to create a brain dump journal to offload any anxieties before the day gets started, or to post different tasks that you have on your mind. One of my patients actually got a Polaroid camera to make a large visual brain dump board on her wall. And basically what she does is she takes a picture of the item. So for example, she'll take a picture of her empty fridge, and then she'll add it to the wall as a reminder to go grocery shopping. In her experience, it helps her to remember it better and it's fun, so she's more likely to do it. And lastly, you can use apps like Trello, Asana, and Notion for tracking progress. Just pick one that you like and stick to it. You don't have to work harder to survive the stress. Give yourself permission to work differently. When you implement strategies that align with your needs and consider the context of your environment, life becomes infinitely easier. And not only do you create the opportunity to be your most productive self, but to be seen as a full, authentic human being who is worthy of respect without any expectation of perfection. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you loved today's episode, be sure to check out our episode on ADHD and asking for help, where I dive into why asking for help is especially difficult for women with ADHD, and I give tips on how to break the cycle. That's it for ADHD and. Thanks again, and don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. This show is brought to you by Understood.org, a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering people with learning and thinking differences, like ADHD and dyslexia. Learn more at Understood.org.